Mr. Kravis had another question. We had a long time together, so he had many questions. He said and we were making parallels to America and his experiences in cities here and what we've learned. He pointed out, what about parents? 50% of children who go to school in India have parents who have not been to school. So, especially mothers. So how do I involve mothers to understand what going to school they understand. You get a kid ready in the morning, you comb their hair, you get them dressed and you send them. But what happens when they go into the school? And I told him a little story again from a village. There was this mother and I wanted to kind of figure out how to engage her in this business of learning. And I asked her, so how do you know if your child is learning in school? And she said, you're asking me a trick question. I can feel it. So I said, it's not a trick question. Your child goes to school. Surely you want to know what he's doing in school. And she said, I'm illiterate. How would I know? So I said, okay. We had a slightly longer chat. But I said, what do you do when your child has fever? So that's very simple. Everybody knows what to do when a child has fever. You first, at least in India, you put your hand on your forehead. And if it's hot, then you do some stuff at home. Fever doesn't go away in 2 or 3 days. You take them to a doctor. You demand some medicines. I don't know about Americans, but we love medicines. And then, if the fever still doesn't go away, you go to a better doctor and ask for more medicines. So I said, so clearly you have a medical degree. She said, again, you're trying to trick me. You know I'm illiterate. So I said, if you are illiterate, but you can do so much to improve the health of your child, why can you not engage in doing something about simple thing like, is he able to read? She was kind of seeing my point, but by this time the whole village had gathered. And clearly people were waiting to see who wins. And if you're running a big campaign, it's important to win. Anybody who's been a missionary knows you have to have some tricks up your sleeve, or conversions won't take place. So I took out this little piece of paper I have which has letters and words and sentences, and I said, please look at it and tell me what looks difficult. And she said, I cannot because I'm illiterate. So I said, we've already proven that you're extremely skilled. You can seek medical help across the village and So eventually she did point to the fact that the letters look simple and the words look a little bit more complicated, and then the sentences are probably the hardest thing. And then we asked the child to bring his textbook. And we looked at it, and it was quite similar. Now, this is a very small story, but I think this is what needs to be done, because we often have barriers that stop ourselves from moving forward. And the fact that she's illiterate doesn't mean that she cannot be an advocate for her child. This is just an example to show you that if you live in a country like India, and you want this very ambitious goal that all children must read, we have to develop ways in which people who have been left out can be brought in. I don't suggest arguing with mothers everywhere, but I do think that we need to come up with more and more simpler strategies to bring people in. The last big thing that I want to talk about is how do you work with the school systems? How do you work in the village? How do you work with parents? What do you do with children? We have very simple techniques, which if I had another 20 minutes, I could train all of you, but we don't. How do we work with governments? Now, we are a federal system like you, and the school education is part of what the state governments do. We do this big survey every year, which brings out estimates of reading in every district in India. India has about 600 districts. And it's the only survey which actually tells you what level your children are at every year. So every year when the report comes out, we will go to the governments at different levels. And the first year, I remember, I took this report to the person who was heading the school system in one of our most backward educational districts called Uttar Pradesh, UP. And I made an appointment, we sat down, and this gentleman looked at the result, and it was for UP much worse than the India average. And he said to me that, I can't refute this because as government, I don't have anything else that is, that tells me a different story. And if this is a problem, and you've pointed out the problem, what is your solution? UP has 120,000 primary schools run by the government. And the solutions we have are almost too simple to propose to a big man like this. So what we said is that we have some ideas about how you can change or how you can accelerate learning, but we'd like to work with you to do it. And we'd like to work with you for a year or two to see how far we can go, because we know that this works in villages, it works with community level volunteers. But we need to work with you to see if teachers will accept it or not. And within a few months, there was some negotiation back and forth. The government said, well, let's give it a shot. You have nothing to lose by trying out something simple, because it's not going to be very expensive. And this is the way in which I think we've worked at different levels of government, sometimes at the village government level, sometimes at the district, and sometimes at the state. Our experience over the last 15 years shows that there's a lot to do, but there's a lot that can be done. And at least in India, and I'm sure in all countries, there are lots and lots of people who want to help to build their own country. I want to end by just sharing with you something that many of us in Pratham use when we are working either with teachers or with young volunteers. In 1930, Gandhi walked for 23 days. And the end of it, he picked up a fist of salt. That changed India's history forever. Today, you don't need to walk, but if you pick up a book and work with kids, India's history can change again. And we find that people join us when you say things like this. So I'd like to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to represent our very large organization. It has meant an incredible deal to us that you found us, you researched us, and you found us worthy of coming here. We would like to invite all of you to come to India. Many of you travel. Do take the time out to see whether what I've said actually makes sense on the ground. I'd very much like to thank Mr. and Mrs. Kravis, the selection committee, many of you here who have supported Pratham in many different ways, and also hundreds of people who are not here. We have many state governments in India who have also made us and made our work possible. The award for us was a huge surprise. And Mr. Kravis actually pointed out that the initials KKR have a different meaning in India. I hadn't thought of it before. We have a cricket team called the Calcutta Knight Riders, which has the same, and apparently when he looks up his blog, he gets many more hits for the cricket team than for his company. But what we'd like to do, it's substantial money for us. What we'd like to do is not put this money into our usual running of the programs. It is it's a bonus for us, and we'd like to save the money and actually use it for leadership. From the ground, we have many people who have risen and who are now leaders. I remember I lived in Chicago for many years. I went back to Bombay, and I found that my PhD and many other things were quite useless for the work I really wanted to do. And the person, a girl by the name of Suvarna, who used to be a preschool teacher, a community-based preschool teacher, was my professor. And I'm not saying anything against my professors at the university, but she taught me many things in the first couple of months that I was there. She now heads our entire early childhood program. And it is for people like this that we feel we've grown them, but we need to really nurture them and take them further, that we'd like to save the Kravis Prize award for and use it over the next few years. We will speak to maybe many of you. We will certainly speak to the Kravis Leadership Institute to figure out how do we make better leaders. But thank you again very much. It's been incredible being here, and we hope that we will see many of you in the years to come. Thank you.